Welcome back to Built to Ship, the podcast where we go behind the scenes with founders and product leaders shipping AI features and products into the world. I'm really excited to be joined by David today. He's the founder and CEO of Continua.ai, a startup that's bringing the first social AI agent into group chats across SMS, iMessage, Discord, and more. And their vision is an AI that joins the conversation, can listen, help, and schedule for your group and turns chaos into organized action. David, it's great to have you.
Tyler, thanks so much for inviting me.
Of course. Well, I want to start with your background. What were you doing before Continua? What gave you the idea? And tell us a little bit about that founding story.
Yeah, that's right. So got my PhD at Carnegie Mellon in computers. Immediately after that, joined Google. Joined in late 2005, left April 23. So I was there for, 17 and a half years or so. I had a wonderful time. It was a place where I made a lot of friends, place where I felt like I was just able to connect ideas in new ways and put stuff out, sort of like a serial entrepreneur within Google itself. I worked on a lot of different projects. A couple of them that I'm particularly proud of was Google Goggles. That was a world's first mobile visual search engine where you could just point your phone at anything, get a response. It was a bit before its time, before deep learning. So, didn't work so great. But now your listeners might be familiar with Google Lens, which is sort of outgrowth or a reboot of that kind of project. Another was Glass. That was the wearable computer with the trackpad on the side. Phenomenal experience working on that, trying to bring all sorts of contextually relevant information into a system that can then make decisions, make suggestions, and so forth. And that's kind of the bridge to what I'm doing now, I would say. I left Google because I felt like the rate of change of technology was faster than I'd ever seen it. And for me, it was time to build something on my own. My dad was an inventor, and so it's always been on my bucket list to start a company. And it just feels like with this new technology that we have, there's so much untapped potential, especially when it comes to bringing in context, real-time context, bringing in content, things that people are talking about, and then trying to deliver a great experience. And for us, that's about what we call social AI, bringing AI into the content, into the context in which people are already communicating, such as iMessage and Google Messages.
Amazing. It's a fascinating background. And I have a few friends who work in AR and that space, and it's a really cool technology. And, when Google Glass came out, I was really excited, obviously early days, and we're still in the early days, but that's really cool that you have a background there. And I was going to ask, how did that relate to what you're doing now? Like LLMs are very different, et cetera. But you kind of teased it a little bit when you talked about context, right? It's that would be my guess. Like you mentioned that one of the things you were doing, on those products was like when you're looking at objects in the real world, how do you pull context about them? And similar with,
sure.
With this.
Yeah. So let me give an example. One of the things that we spoke about back in the days of Glass was, let me give an example use case. You might say something like, "Where did I leave my keys?" Right? And in order for Glass to be able to answer something like that, there had to be a time earlier in the day or earlier in the week where it saw your keys. Now that use case is really, really hard because of the thermal issues, the battery issues. You can't have the system on all the time. While it wasn't something that was possible back then, and we're talking like 2012, 2013, 2014, it's an idea that has stuck with me for a long time. So I think about use cases in Continua where it could be something like you have a group chat with a bunch of friends and you're interested in sports and you're really interested when something happens, maybe a player is traded or I don't know, just something in the sporting world. And so an agent that is able to always have a kind of bead on what's going on in kind of the world's zeitgeist and also be extremely personalized so it knows what people most care about, it can bridge the gap. Now, on the technology to actually bridge the gap, we're so much closer now with LLMs. 10 years ago, there was so much feature engineering. And, by that, it's basically smart people trying to reason about what would be effective and what would not be effective. But if anything, I would say the definition of machine learning is one of humility, where we understand that we don't have the capacity to envision all the angles in which different things can be connected or associated. And so instead of trying to build those systems directly, we build systems that learn how to do those sorts of things.
Amazing. And, I'm curious when it comes to, you mentioned that like now LLMs make it a lot more possible to do some of these things. What's the biggest challenge in building Continua? Is it, context engineering? Is it actually like something that's less LLM based? It's something like, infrastructure at scale, or doing real-time SMS, etc. Is there anything that's, someone wouldn't expect?
That's a wonderful question. So probably the most difficult thing is timing when it comes to deciding to do a project or to build a specific product. Imagine a wave. You don't want to be ahead of it. You don't want to be behind it. If you want to surf the wave, you have to be just right. And so I think, at least in my experience, the people that I've worked with, the people who have impressed me the most are those who have the greatest intuition for the time to get on the wave. I would also say that the way to increase your chance of success is to take many shots, because it's not possible to always time that wave. So if you can take many shots on goal, then there's a chance that you'll catch that wave just right. When it came to this specific idea, we were thinking about it earlier this year. And well, actually, these are things that I've been thinking about for many years, but it wasn't in the context of group chat. I was thinking about this in different contexts. Earlier this year, we started thinking about it in the context of group chat. And the first thing that I thought was, we have to be too late. There's just no way that no one else has done this, or that if we start now, we'd be overtaken. It turns out that this problem is really, really hard. At Continua, we view the march toward AGI as being something that has to pass through the waypoint of social AI. In other words, you cannot achieve AGI without first building systems that have emotional intelligence, social etiquette, machine etiquette, however you want to call it. So think of it this way. If you were bringing someone on your team to a meeting, maybe they're a new employee, what are the sorts of characteristics you'd want this person to have in a group context, say a meeting? Well, you'd want them to not speak if they didn't have anything important to say or something useful for the conversation. You'd want them to interrupt if they do have a way to move the conversation forward. You'd want them to listen really carefully, because what they hear today could help them do their job tomorrow. And last but not least, you'd want them to ask questions if they were confused, if they didn't have enough context. It's those four characteristics that we had to build into Continua. If you think about how most LLMs work today, they'll respond to everything. They're instruction tuned so that it's a single user, single assistant, call and response. It will always respond. You don't want that in a group setting at all. So we had to sort of break the LLM's brain to get it to function in a way that would work. There's a lot of other challenges at a company, as you might imagine. You hit on message distribution as one. So many things to balance. But what I would say maybe for you and your audience is that the research opportunities in this space, I think, are so incredibly interesting, and we're just so excited by making a dent into this problem of what we call social AI.
Yeah, it's super fascinating. I think you bring a really good point that, sometimes I'm kind of frustrated with an LLM, like, why did you just respond to this last, this message that I sent that, maybe you just need to take an action. You don't need to write a paragraph back to me. And that would be extremely frustrating in a group chat. So I'm curious, let's get into a little bit of the technical side.
Sure.
You mentioned you had to kind of retrain the LLM's brain, right?
Yeah.
I like that as an analogy. But, when it came to actually doing this, what does that mean? Is that context engineering? Is that fine tuning? Is that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a pretty active blog. So like, if you are interested in some of the technical details, you can just check out blog.continua.ai. What I would say is that there's a few different things that we had to orchestrate together, including several fine tunes. At the core is this notion of intent classification. What's the most appropriate thing to happen in a chat at any given time? And then how do you do that in a resource conscious way, right? So, in fact, fine tunes really give you three things. One, they give you potentially higher quality if you have good training data. They give you lower latency, because usually there's fewer parameters in something that's a bit smaller. In something that you're fine tuning. And then third, they're usually cheaper, again, due to lower number of parameters. I mean, there's a really interesting discussion on, I don't know, I sort of refer to this as rates of knowledge calcification. Are you doing things simply in the prompt, or are you, fine tuning a whole model, or are you creating a LoRa adaptation layer? What's so interesting is how fast this research is moving. I was a bit skeptical about how much you could do in the context window. And there's been so much great research. I think there was a paper called Jeba from August 2025 talking about Pareto selection for optimizing the prompt. I also think that this whole idea of managing your context window is kind of like a novel underpinning of computer science now. It's something that I had never thought we would be doing at this point in time, and yet it's so critical and is going to be, if not already, taught in schools as like a fundamental thing that we need to understand moving forward in computing.
Yeah, and in early days, it was, of people playing with LLMs, it was like, oh, you need to manage the context window just because you don't have space, because, they weren't that large. And these windows are getting larger, attention spans getting larger. But there's also a key of like, you don't want to give information that's not necessary in the moment, right? Like to your analogy of like a team, if someone's bringing up even like a human employee, like they bring up something that's about some other random fact that's not related to the conversation, that's going to confuse themselves and confuse the conversation. So
yeah. Well, there's a couple things there. That's a really good point, Tyler. So I would say really large context windows are not a panacea. You have basically two problems, and you pointed out one problem is that the precision of the answer could go down because you're just putting a lot of unnecessary things in there that's not going to help the model do its job best. Second is that latency goes up, right? So there's no free lunch. You can actually get higher quality, lower latency if you're careful about what you're putting in. And that obviously takes more work. But again, I think that this is just such an interesting aspect. One of the first things I built when I started this company was a sort of memory scheduler for context windows. There was this really elegant idea for CPU scheduling that came out a long time ago called lottery scheduling, where there was a kind of probabilistic slicing amongst threads based on the number of tickets they held. And I did the same thing for scheduling the context window, which is something that the original author of lottery scheduling realized you could do way back when he wrote his paper. And so you can imagine having a different set of weights to different things that you think should be in context. Say you give, 50 tickets to stuff about vacation planning, 10 tickets to people's food allergies or whatever. And now you can sort of like pick chunks in that rough proportion. So yeah, I think that context is really key, and I can't think of anything else I'd rather be doing than trying to work on this problem of social AI, and we're really psyched by it and really psyched by the usage and the different really unique things people are doing with our product.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting, and illuminating to realize how much this is not just a straightforward problem. It's not the same as, and actually, like with most LM applications, even how you manage context windows might be different, right? Like to your point about the lottery approach, that might work in a certain situation where you don't really know inherently what's the most important thing, but depending on your product, if you're doing an LM that makes, marketing campaigns, you're going to know that the brand needs to always be in the context,
Sure.
or like the brand
Yeah. You don't want
guidelines.
that to be, a roll of the dice.
Right. So it's really interesting how broad the engineering, approaches and challenges are. Speaking of that, I really want to get into the idea of like evaluation, measurement, these things. Obviously, when you have a new technology or a new feature in your product, you're going to just like build something and launch it and, kind of see how it goes. But we're seeing the industry start to evolve more, where people are now saying, we have a lot of agents in production. They're doing complex things. They're calling tools. They have access to, RAG information through vector DBs. And now we need to see, number one, is it answering the customer's question? Is it calling the correct tools? But even a step beyond that, let's say it does all that correctly in the conversation. Is it still driving that end product or business outcome? Is it selling this this e-commerce product and getting people to add to cart 2 days later because they interact with the bot? I'm curious, what's your North Star goal in that case for Continua? Like, how do you measure if it was successful in this group chat? And then, do you have any approach to evals? Is it custom built in-house? Do you use any tools?
Sure. So I'll speak generally about evals. I like what you were saying before about driving toward, like a conversion event or something like that. I think that having different goals, having end-to-end goals are really good. You can always chop things up into smaller goals, almost like the difference between a micro benchmark versus a macro benchmark in like, timing of computation. I think loop closing as much as possible is useful. So imagine you were building something that created a UI and it's using an LLM to do that. Well, to what extent can you use an LLM to evaluate that UI? There are things like Playwright and so forth that can run headless Chrome and do sort of like monkey chaos type clicking around. I think it's important to build toward the future where something like that is economical and of high quality. Gemini 3.0 Pro's screen understanding is really, really good. Big kudos to the team that did that. I'm friends with many of them. And so you can see where things are going, and I think it's important to architect in that direction. Other thing I would say on evals is that it really depends what kind of company you are, right? To have the resources to get really high quality human labeled training data is something that not every company has access to. So synthetic training data could be really good. And then the last thing I'll say is that I think there's so much low-hanging fruit when it comes to building systems that while eval is really important, I wouldn't say it's the first thing that a new product should be too concerned about. Get the minimum viable experience up and running. You're going to notice that the amount of quality you gain from fixing dumb bugs in your program will far exceed what an eval will get you. And once you have things stable, then concentrate on eval.
That's great. That's great advice. Yeah, I think too many people get frozen with the new technology, especially with LLMs. They don't get anything in production. They aren't testing. They're just theorizing. And what do we need to what system do we need to set up to measure and monitor this before they've even launched anything? That being said, let's say you follow this approach, you launch something, in the case of Continua, you now have a group chat. Continua can respond, can look up your calendar. How are you guys evaluating whether or not like it called that, someone said something about calendar? This is an opportunity for Continua to come in and suggest a scheduling? Do you have a way to observe that? Is it mostly just user feedback in the early days? To me, that's even a form of eval.
Yeah, it's a combination. So we generate synthetic data. We have a large number of different characteristics that we look at. Like you said, whether a tool was called or not. Mimicry, is the tone there? Is the personalization there? The vocabulary, how is that? And then there's just things around latency. Like there's so many things that can go wrong in a system. So you're talking, purely about like LLM quality eval, but like our product, this social AI product, there's so much that goes into timing as well, right? On text messaging apps, we're used to people, sometimes they respond immediately, sometimes, they take a little bit more time, and we adapt to whether someone's present or not. It's not the goal for us to create a wall of text that looks like every existing AI system. We're trying to create something that feels like another participant in the chat. Now, I should also say, as far as the product goes, we're really clear that we're not creating an AI companion or a friend or anything like that. We think that it's quite problematic. What we have aimed to do, and what I think we're very successful at, is creating an agent that helps people experience the fullness of human-to-human connection, that helps them remember to go out and grab a beer or go out and touch grass. And I think that's a big distinguishing characteristic on what we've built.
Yeah, it's a great call out. There's ways that AI can add utility to our lives. There's ways that maybe it can be problematic and add challenges. And on that note, I want to share your website. As you mentioned, kind of what it looks like my screen's having a challenge with screen share. Sorry about that. Instead, I'll give a shout out: Continua, Continua.ai. And maybe you can just share a little bit about like where you guys are at. Are you looking for beta users? Are you live today? Can people try the product, and how can they get in touch and follow along?
Yeah, absolutely. Great questions. We're in general availability, and we have been for, I don't know, sometime in the summer. It's probably the easiest product in the world to use. There's nothing to download. All you do is add a phone number to a group chat, and you just type. So use iMessage, use Google Messages, use whatever you want to use. We also have a Discord integration if you want to add it to your Discord server. We're working on Slack, and that's been pretty amazing. We've had a lot of magical moments on our internal company Slack with that. Our company is mostly in New York. We do have an office in Seattle as well. And we are hiring. We're looking for systems engineers. We're looking for machine learning engineers. So we have a careers link off of Continua.ai. You can check that out if you'd like to potentially work with us.
Amazing. Yeah, highly recommend it. Sounds like a great team to work on, especially with your deep background, in the space at Google for so long. And I'm glad to hear that you took the leap to start your own thing. And maybe my last question before we jump off, what do we expect next from Continua? What are you all building towards, and what can we get everyone excited about?
Yeah, so we think a lot about collaboration, cooperation opportunities all over the place. I mean, that's what Continua is all about. It's helping people plan a vacation, decide what movie to watch, or even parents figuring out pickup times of their kids. It's almost like having a household PM in a sense. This is all happening in group chat right now, text-based. So we're thinking about more like real-time interactive things like you and I are having right now. Nice. There's so many AI startups out there that are doing things like meeting summarization. That's fantastic. We think about use cases where there might be a discussion in real time, and Continua can raise its hand. It's a quiet listener most of the time, but when it can help, it'll raise its hand and say, David, Tyler, did you know you guys are connected on LinkedIn via, XYZ, or, just bring up something that we've been talking about, or if we have a question and we just don't know the answer to it, you can proactively do that on the side. So things like that we're working on, things like the Slack integration, and how can an agent in group chat really effectively help people along and really feel just like another participant, and not awkward or weird, and not giving a wall of text, but has a true understanding of your goals. So yeah,
Amazing.
it's a lot of stuff ahead of us.
That's exciting. Yeah. And I love how much of a nuanced approach you're taking. It's not just throw a wall of text in there. You guys are being thoughtful about how do you actually add utility and not distraction. So really appreciate the conversation, David. Really interesting stuff you guys are doing over there. And again, Continua.ai, go check out their product, add the phone number to your group chat, and maybe apply for a job. So thanks again, David. And looking forward to keeping in touch and seeing what you all ship next.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Have a good one.